Hello and welcome to Nothing But the Truth. The near midnight dismissal of the former Foreign Secretary has taken the country by surprise. Whilst no one would dispute the Prime Minister's prerogative to replace the Foreign Secretary, was this done in a becoming and gracious fashion? Here with me to talk about what's happened is former Foreign Secretary Sujata Singh. Mr. Singh, let's start with the government's decision to curtail your tenure as Foreign Secretary, to use the government's language. How and when was this news communicated to you?
I got a call from the External Affairs Minister's office that she wanted to see me at 2 p.m. on the 28th. I had a feeling that I knew what it was about, because normally she is very clear about what she wants to see me. So I went across and I started talking to her about the next day's briefing of the Parliamentary Select Committee, and she basically looked at me and said that I have some not so pleasant news to convey to you, and this is that the Prime Minister wants Dr. Jaishankar as his Foreign Secretary. So I said, okay, what would you like me to do? And I said I'd be happy to hand in my papers. And then we talked some more. She was very gracious. And after that I went and informed my family, went to office, cleared my desk, and gave in my letter.
Before Mrs. Swaraj spoke to you on the 28th, was there any earlier occasion when you were given an indication that the Prime Minister wanted to replace you, that he wanted a new person as Foreign Secretary?
You know, there have been rumors swirling about for months. As a matter of fact, I knew that bets were being laid even before the government was sworn in, that I'd be one of the first secretaries to go. And you learn to ignore all the static and to focus on your work.
But at no time formally did the government, either directly or through an intermediary, say that they wanted to replace you?
No.
Was there not an occasion in December, perhaps, when someone, a senior retired civil servant, met you on behalf of the Prime Minister?
Well, you know, it wasn't projected to me as meeting me on behalf of the Prime Minister. What happened was that I was kept out of a meeting, and I remember being rather angry about it, upset, because I believe that the Foreign Secretary should be in all such important meetings. And I discussed it with some of my fellow colleagues, and they said it's not the first time that the Foreign Secretary has been kept out, because PMOs tend to be a little arbitrary, shall I say. Not this PMO only, but PMOs in the past as well.
And was that the point at which someone got in touch and said that?
The next day I was called in for a cup of coffee, and it was a very matter-of-fact conversation as to what happened. I said, I don't know, you tell me. And would you think of, since the Prime Minister doesn't seem to be comfortable with you, I said, well, I don't know about that, I'm doing my job.
So this person said, would you think of leaving because the Prime Minister is not comfortable?
Would you think of another job?
What was your answer?
I said, I'm not interested.
Did they specify what sort of job they were?
No. It was just about, say, 3 to 5 years, perhaps a constitutional position. And I didn't ask for any further details because I was not interested.
Can I ask who this person was who had this conversation?
You know, there are certain things that I keep to in confidence, and I would not like to.
But was it a person who had the authority to make this suggestion on behalf of the Prime Minister?
In hindsight, I guess, though he projected it as his own personal thought because of what had happened the previous day.
And this was a person in the PMO?
Yes.
Could it be the Principal Secretary?
Karan, I'm not answering your question.
All right. And this was in December?
Yes, mid-December.
Going further back in time, were there ever any indications, hints and suggestions from other sources, or perhaps from the Prime Minister himself, that he had a problem with you?
No. He was always courteous, always polite, and since there was such an intense foreign policy engagement, even from before he took office, I interacted with him very frequently.
So at no point did he make clear in any way, even by hint, that he had a problem?
No.
Did you have the sort of access to the Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary should have?
Look, every Prime Minister has his own style, and this Prime Minister's style, as I knew it, was to interact at fairly regular intervals with the Ministry of External Affairs. Sometimes it could be as much as thrice a day, because his foreign engagements were so intense.
So you had a lot of interaction, and he had a lot of opportunity to point out that he wasn't happy, but he never did.
Well, that's up to him, surely.
So just to sum up this bit, on the 28th at 2 o'clock, Sushma Swaraj summoned you and told you that the Prime Minister wanted to replace you. Sometime prior to that, in December, I believe, there was an informal conversation where it was suggested, but not quite officially, would you like another job? And you said no. But other than these two occasions, in fact, you've had no hint, no sign from the Prime Minister that he was unhappy.
No, no. And when that other job was suggested, I said, look, the day you want me to go, you tell me and I will give in my papers.
You actually said this to the person?
Oh, yes.
So which means that when you were then summoned by Mrs. Swaraj and told they wanted to go and to go immediately, it took you completely by surprise. Because you had anticipated, after your earlier conversation, there would be some warning and an opportunity to put in your papers honorably.
It didn't take me by surprise, Karan, because, you know, it's been such a unsettled and fraught atmosphere for the past few months. I think that a lot of the secretaries, not just me, you remember that big reshuffle that took place, and I remember having a conversation with a fellow secretary, and I said, do you think that's it, or do you think it's the first of many? So he laughed and said, first of many. So, I mean, it's...
The mood among secretaries was one of uncertainty, one of apprehension.
Perhaps. And for me, look, in my own mind I had come to terms with the fact. I told you, within, even before the government had taken office, there were bets that I wouldn't last a week.
There's a lot of speculation that transfers, appointments of ambassadors, etc., that you had wanted to put through were held up. Was that an indication to you that in fact the Prime Minister was not happy with the suggestions you were making?
I am not going to go into that. It is a process that needs to retain its integrity, and I would not like to talk about it.
Was the Foreign Minister supportive of you, and was it the Prime Minister who was blocking? Or did you sense that she too was not supportive?
I have a good relationship with the External Affairs Minister. She was my minister. I was loyal to her, and we understood each other very well.
Let's come to some of the reasons published by the Times of India on Friday why in fact you were curtailed. They say that in fact you first annoyed Mr. Modi when you accepted a paragraph in the BRICS Summit Declaration critical of Israel, and then thereafter India voted against Israel at the UNHRC. And you did this ignoring the fact that Mr. Modi has a very different attitude to Israel compared to earlier governments. Was there such a development? Did this annoy the Prime Minister?
You know, Karan, this is the kind of journalism that gives journalism a bad name. It's completely ill-informed and completely lacking in a basic understanding of how the Ministry of External Affairs functions.
So this is completely untrue?
Absolutely. I don't know about whether Mr. Modi was annoyed or not, and as Foreign Secretary, I take full responsibility for whatever happened during my watch. But the manner in which such paragraphs are drafted in multilateral texts on the lines of what has been drafted earlier, and given the fact that there has been no change in policy vis-a-vis Palestine or vis-a-vis Israel, that paragraph was drafted in precisely the manner that it should have been.
The second reason given by the Times of India for your curtailment is that Mr. Modi was upset that you didn't follow up on his visit to Japan in September with the speed and efficiency he expected.
That's again a completely ill-informed and planted story. what were the outcomes of the visit to Japan? $3.5 trillion, 3.5 trillion yen in investments. What is it that I should have followed up on? It was for the Ministry of Commerce, the Department of Industrial Promotion, Department of Economic Affairs, the civil nuclear deal. Come on, you've got to be serious.
So once again, this is completely untrue.
It's complete nonsense.
The third reason that the Times of India gives for your curtailment is that when Vibrant Gujarat invited the Danish Prime Minister, the Ministry of External Affairs under you did not budge from their position that no high-level contact with Denmark is possible until the Kim Davy issue is sorted out. As a result, the Prime Minister from Denmark didn't come. Mr. Modi was very upset.
Okay, again, as Foreign Secretary, I take complete responsibility, even though I don't directly look after Europe except for the three countries, UK, France and Germany. I stand by the Secretary who made that decision, and I stand by my ministry's prerogative to put up the advice that it feels is in the best national interest, and I also stand for the prerogative of the Prime Minister's office to overrule and take the final call on any advice given to it that it feels is not correct.
At the time, the PMO overruled this or didn't?
Well, it clearly didn't.
So it hardly behoves them to now complain about it.
No, I mean, this is stupid. It just reveals a complete lack of understanding of how the Ministry of External Affairs functions.
Who is leaking all of this to the Times of India? Because clearly, someone in government has briefed that paper.
Clearly.
Do you have any suspicions who's done it?
You know, I've never been a great fan of, first of all, I don't leak myself. And second, I don't believe in giving journalists access to privileged information. And most importantly, I don't believe in disseminating and spreading untruths.
Now, the Prime Minister's office sources, and I emphasize sources, are letting it be known that at the core of their problem with you was what they call your negativity. They say whenever a proposal was put up for consideration, Sujata Singh wouldn't find a way of implementing it, she'd find several problems instead to knock it down.
Which specific proposal are you talking about? Because I haven't knocked down any proposal.
Were you negative in your attitude?
About what? This is stupid. You know, you've had the 8 months of the most successful foreign policy that any new government has implemented. On Tuesday, before the government was sworn in, I got a call from Arun Jaitley telling me what I thought of the ideas for the SAARC leaders to be invited. It didn't take me half a second to respond and say, great idea, we'll go for it. And they landed on Sunday. I had 3 days. I doubt that many foreign secretaries would have done it.
So Arun Jaitley is actually proof of the speed with which you implemented an idea which he'd given you.
The Prime Minister's proof. I went and briefed him twice before the leaders came. The third time on the night that they were sworn in. They came after that, the visit to Bhutan. My idea, I said you must have a bilateral visit to the neighborhood before the multilateral BRICS summit. On the BRICS summit, it was not just one secretary, there were 3 secretaries who went. I went because it would be his first meeting with President Xi Jinping and President Putin. The visit to Japan, I put it forward. The visit to the United States, I can't think of a single idea that I have shot down, not one.
So far from being negative in your attitude and response, you actually were supportive, you were putting forward good ideas, and you were swiftly doing what they wanted you to do.
Absolutely. I have no hesitation in saying it.
Something else that's been said in the papers is that in 2013, when you became Foreign Secretary, Dr. Manmohan Singh's first choice was Jaishankar. Sonia Gandhi forced him to change his mind and make you Foreign Secretary instead because of your family's links with the Gandhis.
Tell me, Karan, for a Prime Minister who is so famously reticent, isn't it odd how the entire media seems to be under this impression that a certain civil servant was his favored candidate, and they seem to have bought it hook, line and sinker?
Once again, someone has leaked this to create that impression.
Well, perhaps I should tell you that on the day of the swearing in, when I took leave of Dr. Manmohan Singh because I couldn't be present when President Karzai called on him, I told him, I said, this remarkable thing that's happening today of 7 SAARC heads of government, barring Bangladesh because Sheikh Hasina was going to Japan. I said it rests on the foundation that you built in terms of what we did with our neighbors. And it couldn't have happened without the quiet, solid diplomacy. And he said, you have justified my faith in you.
In other words, you were his first choice. This story that Jaishankar was his preferred candidate is not true.
I do not wish to speculate about decisions that were made when I was not here in Delhi. And even if I was here in Delhi, I would not know of the factors that went into making them.
A follow-on to that. Do you think your relationship with Mr. Modi suffered because he saw you as a Gandhi loyalist?
I have no way of reading Mr. Modi's mind. I can just tell you that I enjoyed the best of relations with him. And when he came in, I admired him for his decisiveness, for his incisiveness, for the questions that he asked. He asked very good questions, getting to the heart of the matter. He was a very quick learner, and for the manner in which he went about his work. I liked it. I liked the style. And I tend to get along with most people, Karan. And I look for the good in them. I look for what is positive about them. And if there are any negative elements in any boss that I have served, in any minister that I have worked with, I say it's par for the course.
And I'm just picking up on something you said. You never had the feeling that Mr. Modi didn't get on with you. He never said it. That you've already told me. That you never had any hint or inclination. You got on with him and you felt he was getting on with you.
I did.
Now, when you did, on the 28th night, submit your papers, it wasn't a resignation, it was a letter asking for voluntary retirement, early retirement.
That's right.
How did you phrase that letter?
As instructed by the Prime Minister.
And how did the PMO respond to those words?
Well, I got a call asking me to, if I would consider deleting it.
From the PMO?
Yep.
Now what did you say?
That I would not.
Because the truth is, that is the only reason you were seeking voluntary retirement.
It was the instructions of the Prime Minister, and as a good civil servant, I follow instructions.
So when the PMO asked you to delete those words, they were clearly saying, we don't want history to record that we asked you to resign or to accept voluntary retirement. They were trying to distance themselves from this.
Karan, I don't know, and very frankly, I don't care. I did what I had to do, and it's done. It's over with. It's behind me now.
One last question. You've said in an earlier interview to NDTV that you were looking for an honourable exit. Do you think when this intermediary or whoever it was that spoke to you in December and asked, would you take another job, talked about a job with a 3 or 5 year tenure, that they were trying to find an honourable exit, and that when you said, no, I don't want another job, you boxed the government into a corner because they were then left with just 2 choices, either to keep you as Foreign Secretary, which they didn't want to do, or to dismiss you, in a sense, in a dishonourable way?
You know, in my mind, the definition of honourable exit is to let me go with honour, with my reputation intact, and with my record unblemished.
In other words, without these unfortunate, deliberate, malicious leaks in the papers.
That's precisely what I mean by an honourable exit.
So it wasn't that you wanted another job of dignity and stature. What you wanted was, do not leak maliciously, do not malign me, do not try and destroy my reputation.
I think what is very irritating is this continuous reference to my father, who I love and respect enormously, who is the reason why I sat for the civil service examinations and sat for the Foreign Service. He comes from a very underprivileged background. His father was a weaver. He actually used to weave and take his woven cloth to market from the village.
Do you get the feeling that they're targeting your father through you? Do you get the
No.
feeling that one reason
No.
you never got on with the PM, or one reason why he felt uncomfortable with you, is because he has an animus or a problem with your father?
Look, I don't think so. My father's 87 now. He's been Director Intelligence Bureau. He's been a very upright governor of Uttar Pradesh. He didn't show any favorites. He is a great person, and he is the reason that I am what I am today, because he never expected less of me than he would have of a son.
Mr. Singh, I want to talk a bit about you. The last 3 days since Wednesday must have been not just difficult, but they must have been traumatic. What toll has this taken on you?
I have yet to find out. I'm coming to terms with it. But, you know, the Foreign Service has been what I've built my entire life around. I told you that my father was the person who had indoctrinated me almost from the time I was almost 7 or 8. And I'm a child of the service. I got in 10 days short of becoming 22. I married a batchmate, a fellow Foreign Service officer, and I don't like talking about myself, but I will today when I'm on my way out of public life. I was the first woman to top the Indian Police Service because my father was an Indian Police Service officer and I wanted to pay him that tribute. I topped. I had no intention of entering. There are many things that I have done that I'm proud of, and over the last few months in the Ministry of External Affairs, to give administration a humane face, to give administration a face that had time for people, to introduce transparency into the system, to talk to every officer who wanted to talk to the Foreign Secretary, and to give them time.
Clearly, the Foreign Service was in your blood. It's been your life. Today, do you feel orphaned?
No, not in the slightest. I think that all the men and women who form part of the Foreign Service and who've been sending me messages of support and thanks, you know.
You've had a lot of support from your colleagues. Quietly, perhaps, but a lot of it.
A lot of it. A lot of it.
Emails and messages.
Emails, messages, phone calls.
Let me ask you this. What impact has this whole episode had on the esprit de corps of the service?
I haven't been in the ministry for the past 3 days, and I'd rather not think about something that I had worked so hard to build. You know, there's a head of missions conference going to take place 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and we were going to put up a memorial plaque to our officers, our diplomats and others who were killed in the line of duty in Kabul and in Birmingham. I would have liked to have been there and to have met my ambassadors and high commissioners. I don't know. I think that they will come to terms with it, as they must, but I hope that they take away a lesson of how to conduct themselves with grace, with dignity, with honor, in a service that is much maligned, that seems to be the favorite punching bag of the media for no good reason whatsoever.
I want to end by coming back to you. I don't mean to pry, but how deep is the pain and the hurt?
You can't be serious, Karan. You really can't be serious. It's over. It's done with. It's finished. I am on to my next chapter. I'm going to get my hands dirty. I love gardening, and I'm going to garden. I'm going to get back to weaving like my grandfather was.
The past is over.
It's over.
You've turned a chapter. You've turned your back. The future is what you're looking at.
The future lies ahead.
You're an admirable person, Mrs. Singh. Many people would feel bitterness and pain, but if you have genuinely turned your back on the past and you're looking to the future, that is perhaps a lesson that many who've suffered like you can usefully learn from you. A pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure, Karan.